Welcome. This video is designed to help an Engineering 100 student understand how to establish a pivot table in association with module number 8. Pivot tables are not easy to develop and can be very complicated if you do not have a few of the procedures understood. Let's begin by taking a look at basic pivot table procedures. How to create a pivot table. First of all, you have a large amount of data that you're going to try and analyze. And in this analysis, you will place your cursor in one of the cells within the data. Now make sure the data is complete, has no empty rows or columns, because Microsoft pivot table development goes from the left to the right and from the top to the bottom of uninterrupted rows and columns. Okay. Place your cursor inside, as I said. Then up on the top, you want the insert ribbon. In the left corner, you'll find an icon that says Insert Pivot Table. You click on it. A dialog box will develop. In that dialog box, you have a table range, and it'll automatically fill in the amount of data that you want to look at, as I said, from the uninterrupted columns and rows. It's continuous non-empty cells. It will have a green dashed line that rotates around the data that you're looking at. Then you look at the pivot table location. In this case, new worksheet is chosen. You could also choose an existing worksheet to place this pivot table. We're in our exercises looking at new worksheets. So the size of the pivot table, you may want to change it, and that you can do that by moving around the data cells used, and that's done up here in the top. You can also change criterias. There's an assurance of no overriding existing data if you just follow the default procedures. When you click OK, a new worksheet is developed as shown here, and in that worksheet there's a block on the left side, and that's how you begin. You have the block on the left, and on the right hand side you have pivot table fields. In your presentation, your PowerPoint presentation, these are discussed in more detail, so I strongly suggest you look at that, or maybe even go back and review it. Before diving into developing a pivot table, a person must understand a few things. What data is available and what question is being asked. In this case, we're going to take an example, and the example is which project manager had for the year the most projects on time and on budget and had the highest total funds expended. Let's dissect the question to find out the different data elements. The first one that we look at is we're going to look at project manager. Then we need to understand the time frame, and this one is for the year. Then the next is the most projects, so we're counting, so we need that column of ones over on the far left of your data. We're looking for on time and on budget. And the last item is highest total funds expended. You develop the pivot table with the least amount of data necessary to answer the question. Why would you want to minimize how much information you put on the screen? The more information you provide, the more your managers will ask questions and might cause you to have additional work that you have to perform. Let's take a look at an Excel workbook. The Excel workbook, when you open it, will have an introduction page or an instruction page, And this instruction page will have a section telling you what you're required to do. It will have a place for your name. Your name will be transferred to any worksheets necessary for your name to be shown. And then there's an automatic scoring system. The automatic scoring system, as you develop a pivot table, it will provide additional points, or in some cases it might reduce the points. And when it reduces, that it is a clear indication that you've done something incorrect and you need to start backing up. Now, when you back up, you may end up having to start all over again. So don't get frustrated with that. Just recognize that it's our way of helping you understand when you've done something correct. And we want to make sure that you see that clearly. Now, the data worksheet looks like this, with over 500 rows and 10 columns. So that's 5,000 pieces of data that pivot tables will walk through. You can do this in Excel in many different ways, but pivot tables will be very beneficial in reducing the amount of time required to develop such a report or whatever you're being asked to do. Now, there's one particular column in this data that is very vital for pivot tables, and that is this very far left column. In this case, it's titled PRJ period. This column is all ones. Pivot tables uses it to count. So when you're asking for how many of whatever, project managers, estimated time, this column is how Excel pivot tables counts. Let's proceed on. As we developed assignments, we found that uniformity between students was very diverse. So we have already developed the worksheet for your pivot table. The worksheet has an automatic grading system, so it automatically looks at specific cells looking for specific data. Some examples would be this large merged set of cells where you would place the problem. That would be worth a point. It also has highlighted areas for information as to answering the question, what project manager's name, the most projects on time and on budget, and then the total funds expended. All of it will be developed in your pivot table, and you will have to transfer that information from your pivot table to these cells. Also, your pivot table should reside inside of this outside blue dash dotted line. That would identify that you have the right pivot table, at least size-wise. Your score would indicate the proper data in the proper cells. And as you work through a problem, if you make a mistake, you will either see a reduction in your score or the score will not advance. So you need to go back up what you've done, go back from where you finished, and as you go back, sometimes you may have to go all the way back to start all over. Don't get frustrated with this. It's a way for you to practice pivot tables and just keep right on working through development of a pivot table. The assignment is not an easy one, so we have developed a video help for pivot tables, and it walks you through an example. In this case, it's the one we just talked about, and it would walk you through how to develop a pivot table answering the question. This concludes our overview of pivot tables.